Drake ship, there's a huge ramp on the back of it. All the mechanics are exposed. You can really see the workings of how the ship actually operates. If you're a fan of Drake, it certainly ticks all those boxes.
So I think the Corsair is a particularly cool ship. I love the styling of it, love the asymmetric wing arrangement of it. I think it's just going to be a great, fun addition to the game, giving those sort of players who enjoy that Drake experience their slice of the pie. And you'll be able to experience that yourselves at IAE this year. And a vehicle coming later today, a vehicle that's at the end of the pipeline, we have the Greycat STV. Racing is a cool and fun aspect of Star Citizen, and it's something that we've seen that backers really enjoy doing and organising amongst themselves. It's something that we really want to help support from within CIG. So we wanted to bring a new vehicle to the Verse, which is where the STV came from.
So the STV is the Greycat sports terrain vehicle. It builds on what they learned from the PTV, but it brings it out of the hangars, off of the tarmac, and onto much more rugged terrain.
It's a four-wheeler, two-person open-topped, sport styling, everything you need to razz around on the planet. So the STV is actually part of a wider family of vehicles. You may recognise a resemblance in the name to the Greycat PTV, which is also part of that family. And we also have a third vehicle lined up that we want to do in the future called the UTV, which is the utility terrain vehicle. And we've actually reconcepted the PTV, and we have the concept for the UTV. And when you see all three side by side, you'll see that family resemblance.
The interior again is similar design language, simple layout, easy to clean. That was a big thing for us, even though we don't have like a clean mechanic. All this sort of builds into the sort of visuals of the vehicle. So the floors have got drill holes in them, so we can easily let water through. The seats are easily removable, so you can actually see the bolts where you can just quickly whip them out. And so all of this thinking goes into those kind of vehicles. The wheels are a big feature, large sort of rubber mud guards. Just, there's lots of subtleties in terms of the roll cage, the sort of cross section of all these things. Maybe people wouldn't notice, but for us, these are all part of making the manufacturer consistent.
So the STV delivers that gameplay that is you and a buddy out exploring over our planets. We've got these vast ships that you can explore deep space and go off with big multi-crews. But what this really allows you to do is get down on one of our many planets and go exploring on the ground. It's not just a vehicle for you and a friend. It's also got kind of cargo space in the back. So if you are out there doing missions, rather than having to fly your ships directly to where the mission is, it allows you to land slightly out there, slightly in a safer area. You've still got space to load up with weapons, load up with your whatever mission items you need, and get in and out nice and quick.
Compared to the Cyclone RC, which is a sort of racing variant of a non-racing vehicle, the STV was built from the ground up to be a good racing vehicle. It has a good chassis, it has better handling, it has better top speed, and that what makes it a compelling racing choice.
The best things about Star Citizen as a whole is it kind of brings a lot of gameplay, and it's not all about combat. It's not all about flying these massive ships. And I think one of the things that a lot of us are excited internally about is racing within our game. A lot of us come from a racing background in terms of the games we've developed before. A lot of us are petrol heads at heart. So I think being able to build on that kind of gameplay in Star Citizen is super exciting for us.
And if you stick around to the end of the broadcast, you'll get your first chance at seeing the STV in action in a race organised by Atmo Esports, creators of the Daymar Rally, where you'll see it taking on the terrain for the first time. You'll be able to pick one of these vehicles up today at the end of the broadcast. And finally, the most important aspect of these inaugural shows, the Pick a Ship concept challenge thing. For those of you that have seen previous years, you will have seen that we've thrown up some silhouettes of potential ship and vehicle options and asked for your feedback on which one we should actually make. And the wise among you have probably realised that we end up making pretty much all of them anyway. So instead of just doing that again and pretending that we're not going to do that, we thought we'd do something slightly different this year and just have a single ship option, and the choice is actually the manufacturer and the styling of that ship. So we want to do a nice large civilian mining ship that bridges the gap between the Argo Mole and the RSI Orion, because if you know those two ships, there is quite a gulf of space in between them. We wanted to fill that gap with an intermediary stepping stone before you jump into the big RSI Orion, which the scale of its mining is nothing like any other mining ship in the game. The Mole is the current mining system, just lots of it. So with this larger ship, we want to increase that and also provide onboard space for our ground mining vehicles such as the Rock and the Rock DS, which allows you the flexibility of taking on any mining situation that you can come across. So with that, we have three choices, which are basically the manufacturers. We have RSI as the first choice. So obviously RSI do the Orion, so this would be a smaller vehicle in that family. We have Argo, again, we have the Mole, so naturally it could be a larger step up from that. And then we have MISC, the third option. Obviously MISC do the Prospector, so again, keeping it all within the same family. As you can see from these images, they each have their sort of own unique styling take on that pitch that I've just given you. At the end of this Ship Talk panel, Jared will come on and explain how you get to vote on these three options. And that's the end of Talking Ship, so over to you, Jared.
All right, so the Crusader Spirit is available now as a concept promotion on the robertsspaceindustries.com website. The STV is coming to the universe at the end of the broadcast, just in time for the Atmo Esports racing event that's happening after this. And the Corsair will be making its way to you at this year's Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. And to vote on this year's John Cruise Pick a Ship Challenge thingy, I think he called it. There is a comlink on the robertsspaceindustries.com website where you can go and vote on the manufacturer for the next big mining ship. So, John, recently you went through and just nuked all the speeds of all the ground vehicles, and obviously you did that so that the STV could be the fastest.
That's certainly one take on, on what happened. To talk about it a bit more in depth, it was actually planned for quite some time. As we know, game development timelines go all over the place. So we'd actually done this for 318 Evocati, which sadly did not come out before 317.3 went live. So we did that because, quite frankly, a lot of those vehicles were ludicrous speeds, like 55 meters a second is like over 120 miles an hour off-road.
Yeah, off-road. That's
Off-road, 120 miles an hour is terrifying, especially on like star citizen planets with rocks that would just kill you. So we wanted to bring the cyclones down. We wanted to sort of rebalance everything. Not everything has gone as intended. Like the rocks and the Ursas are not quite where they should be. So we will go back and do more changes. But the idea was people will get to see it in 318. So it wouldn't be such a surprise in 317.3, which unfortunately is how it turned out.
But as far as the new ships go, the Spirit looks amazing.
Yes.
Like, when you say, I gotta ask you, you say this is a small taste of what players can expect for the Starliner, which anybody should know is my favorite ship. That's still not out yet, John.
Here's a little taste what it could be.
When you say a little taste, what does that mean? I'm asking for me, not for these people. I'm asking for me. What does that mean?
So obviously the Starliner is quite an old concept. We didn't really do a huge amount of interior look development. So the time we spent on the Spirit E1, the E1 Spirit, is really what we're going to build on for that. So you're going to have like that VIP first class pod enclosure. Mixmaster, the most important feature of the Starliner.
I have no idea how that's going to work.
Ask Tony, it'll be fine. Yeah, that sort of feel, that luxury transport feel is something we haven't really shown in Star Citizen. Every man and their donkey was pestering me for that Horizon Shuttle concept, and we'd planned to do like a Crusader Cutlass competitor, which is its like.
How many donkeys do you think pestered him?
I hated it because it got abbreviated the 3 Cs. We just called it the ship the 3 Cs.
Just DK.
And then there was that sort of vocal uprising about, hey, John Cook, give me that Horizon shuttle, and that's sort of the two things merged together, and that's where it came from.
And then the Greycat STV, which will be our straight-to-drivable vehicle, going live on the website and stuff at the end of this broadcast. That's an exciting, push in the Greycat,
Yes.
in the Greycat arena. It looks sporty as heck.
Yeah.
And it was neat to see a sneak peek of the UTV as well, which I'm assuming is going to come sometime later on.
Yeah. It's not in active development right now, but when we decided to do the STV, we're like, hey, let's spend the time, let's work out what Greycat as a manufacturer looks like and feels like. Because we had the PTV, people have seen the big Spider Minor from back in the day.
I
They're two
almost
very
wish they had
different
made
things.
Greycat one of the
There
optional
wasn't really like a
manufacturers for
family
that
lineage,
next mining
so we
ship.
built that family
I know.
lineage around that, and we're like,
Right now we're at 3,100 votes
PTV,
and the
still looks
RSI
fine.
is winning.
however,
Yeah.
those three together now, that you can really see like the family lineup, and they each do slightly different things, which is cool. But yeah, the STV is that beach buggy, dune buggy thing to just razz around
No,
planets in.
it's really cool. I really like the styling of it. So, if you, we've got one small thing left, and then one rather large surprise left. So we'll do the small thing first, and then buckle up because I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell you in like 5 minutes. But before we get there, last year during last year's CitizenCon presentation, we explored a lot of the outlaw lifestyle, their outposts, the space stations and stuff. We thought we'd do a little sizzle to follow up on how those things have evolved in the year since. So get ready, we're going to show a quick sizzle, and when we get back, there'll be a neat surprise. So stay tuned. style glimpse at how the outposts and the space stations have evolved since we saw them at last year's CitizenCon 2951. Now, if you've been following our program today, you might think this is it. We're near the end, but we've got one more special surprise in store. Joining us on the show today are two people who probably need no introduction. Founder and CEO, Mr. Chris Roberts.
Hello everyone, how you doing?
How you doing?
I'm doing good, Trevor.
Welcome to the spaceship. Welcome back to the spaceship. You opened the show today. And Squadron 42 game director, Mr. Richard Tyra.
Hello, how's it going?
This is your first time on the spaceship.
It is.
What you think?
It is very nice. Very
I'm really
comfortable.
happy. I'm just gonna ask everybody how it thinks all day. So Chris, Rich, you're here. Are we gonna talk a little bit about Squadron 42? Is that what we're doing right now?
Well, yes and no. So both me and Rich have been heads down working really hard on Squadron, as well as helping out on the PU. And one thing that we've thought that would maybe better to reiterate is there's a huge amount of work that we're doing on Squadron that is going to make a massive difference to Star Citizen, the PU, and we wanted maybe to talk about some of the things that we're doing, because I know a lot of people say, well, everyone's working on Squadron, no one's working on the PU, and that's not really true, because a huge amount of the core gameplay that we're working on Squadron is specifically being built not just for Squadron, but to benefit the PU, and we're just doing it in sort of the test kitchen of Squadron to allow us to really, polish and make sure the features work well without having to be caught up in the sort of quarterly release cycle that you have on the PU, because we were finding it was hard for us to really finish the features out. You know, we'd get a tier 0 out, and then it would just sort of sit around for a while because everyone was rushing on to the next set of features they wanted to do. And for Squadron, obviously, it's shipping as a final polished AAA title, so everything needs to be really put together, working really well, and playing great. And so we're trying in the setup that we're doing now to do that for the features that we've identified that we need to make sure works really well for Squadron, but also will play across into the PU. And so we thought it'd be really useful to come by and tell you all about some of the subtle things and the gameplay aspects that we're working on that maybe you haven't heard from Todd or Tony or everyone else that today and during the ISCs, because we sort of try to keep the Squadron stuff close to our chest to really sort of surprise and impress people when we do it. And so, we thought, why don't we just come by and maybe just talk about little things, maybe show you a sneak peek of something here and there, and not everything, because we're trying to keep it close to our chest until it's really ready to let the baby out of the carriage and it's beautifully dressed and all the rest of it. Hopefully it'll give you guys some insight to what's happening, and also understand that a huge amount of the development resources, even if you think they're working on Squadron, are ultimately working on stuff that will be in the Persistent universe.
So let's talk a little bit more about that before we jump into the actual features. This co-development has been part of the process since the project was first introduced 10 years ago. Congratulations on 10 years. Rich, talk to me a little bit about this co-development. You started with the PU, and then you've now gone over to Squadron 42. So you've worked in both. You've worked in both environments. You know the struggle of T0 features and the quarterly releases for the PU, and now you're getting to kind of your experience is different on Squadron. Talk to me about how that's changed and how it's still work for one still benefits the other, or will ultimately.
Well, when I worked on the PU, it wasn't really the PU or Squadron. It was always, we were working on features that pushed for both projects. So the focus when we were on the PU, or when we were more PU focused, was that we would make sure that we were getting features up and running, developed to the specifications that we needed them to work in a multiplayer environment, and then getting them out into the audience's hands, on quarterly releases. But the biggest issue, I think, if you've seen me doing talks on SC Live over the years, or even in some of our retrospectives, is that we'd get features, and the way that our, CIG is set up is we have feature teams and we have content teams. So what would happen is we'd develop a feature and then we'd push it to the live audience to get feedback around that feature, but there would almost be a lag with the importance of that feature and turning that from a singular thing into an experience, a gameplay experience that you'd go and enjoy and play as part of a fun game. So we always had this lag where content teams were then trying to get on top and then use the feature, and we were trying to change the feature. So I think this kind of pulled it back a bit, allowed us to really focus on both the content and the feature at the same time, because it allowed us to bring it as under one umbrella, which is Squadron 42. So we were able to get that feature in the game, not as a T0, but as a fully whole, capable gameplay experience that, you know, myself, Chris, we can play and enjoy it and go, is this right? Do we need to make it better? How does it feel? And also prove that out with the content that we want. So once we've then developed that and honed it and, you know, almost cast it in that iron, in the crucible kind of thing, we can then move it into the PU, and ultimately, it's not that they're going to get features later, because they would have had them probably earlier, but just not ready. Or, you know, I can pick a few features right now where you think, well, there's not really a huge purpose for them. Mounted guns is a good example. It's not really a huge purpose for them in the PU right now, but we're making sure that any feature that we work on has that purpose. So when it does go into the PU, you know, into the game, people can use it and experience it how we wanted it to be designed and how we wanted it to be, you know, because we struggle a few times. Say, for example, actor status is a good example. We have this vision of how it sits across this broad spectrum of the game, but we're having to piecemeal it in. And that never really gives you the true intentions of where we want to go. And I think this allows us to do that in Squadron, really hone it down and then give it to the PU audience. And I think you know, fundamentally it's better for the development of the features, and it's better for the gameplay experience that both players will experience in both products.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. Is that you know, it's before we were developing the sort of features in isolation, and then they sort of went in to try to get used in Squadron and try to get used in the PU, but they weren't really developed iteratively with content. And so that's the reason why we sort of pulled back some of the stuff and are working on Squadron, is because then we can iterate it with actual gameplay content, which is what Rich is talking about, to make sure it feels well and right with the time to bake it in without having to feel like, oh, okay, we've got a quarterly release out. And because, you know, there's a lot that goes on with the quarterly release in terms of it's not just that one feature. There's all these other things that go into it, and there's a whole process of publishing and splitting off the streams, and so there's a huge amount of effort and work every time you do one of these releases. It sort of eats into your development time in terms of doing the feature, and so pulling it out of that sort of loop and saying, okay, we're going to work with it in Squadron to really make it polished, so it's like not a T0 version. We've really got it down. It feels good. We like playing it. This is fun. This is challenging. It feels good. Is the benefit, I think, that's happening with us on Squadron. When we're seeing it on our side, I know it can be a bit frustrating for everyone on the other side, because we're sort of telling you, oh yes, it's going to be much better than you've got right now. But we are very aware of a lot of, say, usability issues, you know, user experience issues that we are addressing right now in Squadron, specifically for both Squadron and the PU. That's gonna, and we'll show you a couple of little things that will help with that today. But essentially, if you think of core gameplay in terms of, you know, we have some core areas, what we call the, you know, the sort of the actor system, which would be the FPS, the you know, players moving around on foot, you know, interacting with things, the vehicle stuff, which, you know, like John Crew heads up, but you know, the whole vehicle systems, and you know, you've already seen some presentations today on things that are very specific to vehicles, you know, like the sort of need for multiple speeds, and also the resource network, which is going to first roll out in vehicles, but it's going to be universal. You know, all those are sort of core gameplay systems that we have. And so what's happening now is that we're taking some of these systems and really just making them work well for Squadron, and then bam, they're going to come across into the PU. You know, another good example, which hasn't been talked today very much by on the you know, the vehicle side of the Need for Speed, but you probably saw, you know, in the different modes, there needs to be more stuff on the HUD, and you know, we've got a whole redesign that's happening on the HUD and the MFDs that's going to be very different than what you have now. First of all, it's using universal building blocks instead of, you know, what some of the legacy stuff has in Flash, but it's going to be much more minimalist depending on what your context is. It's going to be, depending on what equipment you have, you may be able to cast some stuff to your visor, maybe not. And we're building this system to work well in all the ships used in Squadron, and then it will get rolled out to the PU, which has obviously much wider range ships. But as we're designing it, we're building it with both Squadron and the PU in mind. And so there's a lot of things, people have talked about the star map forever, or, so that has definitely been a major, there's right now, I think, 3 engineers, a couple of visualists on it that we're really sort of working to make, the new star map, which people haven't had. It's been in development yet. We're not quite ready to show you today, but that is going to be a much improved experience. But all of it, so navigation, traversal, combat, the whole feel of it, all things that we're really focusing on here to bring across into the PU after we've got it working really well in Squadron. And so I think ultimately it's going to be good for the PU, and a lot of things are going to sort of come together over the next couple of years. We're pretty excited, so we wanted to visit you and talk a little bit about it.
I think there is 2 common themes that I think you'll see throughout the entirety of this talk as well. One is the fact that it's how we develop the features. That everybody looks at individual features, has got the microscope of that specific feature, but it's how they all interact together to create the game. So it's about bringing them all together to create that gameplay experience. And number 2 is that none of these are like, oh, we're going to get to this in however time, and we're going to work on that. All of the stuff that we'll talk about today is stuff that we're actively working on, and not in the inception, but we have in our hands. We can play it, we can see it, we're feedbacking on it. So it's something that we're fairly advanced along, and so hopefully we'll be able to pull back the curtain a little bit.
Yeah, that's some of the things that we're going to talk about, and I think we're about ready to start getting into it here. Some of the things will have aspects to show. Some of the things won't have aspects to show, like the star map, like Chris just said. And whatnot. Some of the things will be presented in test maps because we don't want to give away any Squadron 42 specific locations and stuff like that. That said, I think we can maybe show some stuff in Asiato because people have
we already
seen
showed one location.
Yeah. So you guys ready to this enough preamble?
Let's go.
Let's start with Rich, you were the AFT guy. Now you're the whole Squadron game guy. But let's start with something that affects everybody. This is a first-person universe, after all. Let's talk about the FPS radar and the player interaction system stuff. What can you tell us about how this has evolved?
That's interesting because we obviously, I think I've given a talk on FPS radar and scanning in the past, and I think the biggest thing that when we look at what Star Citizen is now, what's the first thing that you do? You're in your bed. How do you interact with the game? How do you interact with the environment that's around you? Doors, getting into your ship. How do you interact with kiosks? And a lot of the thing that we realized is that, and it's not something new, it's just something we've always wanted to get to, is how does the player interface with the game? How do they translate their controls and what they want them to do, ultimately in the universe that they're playing? And how does that then translate in the computer game so that it does what you expect it to do? And I think one of the biggest things was the player interaction experience, where we kind of used this terminology to understand that's like interact mode, personal inner thought, the player interaction system, all of these umbrella systems that kind of sit underneath this main kind of like saga, shall we say. And I think that's one of the things that we really want to improve and make better, because I think it's lacking right now. If you go and walk around the universe, generally having to go into interact mode, having to use the cursor, having to select things, and we've spent a lot of time trying to make the world physical and feel right and immersed, that you're immersed in it.
Well, you can interact with things, like the props are interactable.
Exactly.
You can do things, you can push things around, you can move them. The whole goal is to make it a sort of physically living universe.
Exactly.
That you can interact with to a level that in most FPS games you don't, right? Because most FPS games you run around, you shoot things, maybe you pick up a gun that gets dropped, but you generally, most everything's static. And so our goal definitely for the PU, it's one of the reasons why we're doing the persistent, the whole idea of persistent streaming and later on the server meshing is to have this fully persistent universe that, you can push the chairs around, or that cup I could take off your desk and take it to my spaceship instead of your spaceship, Jared. and it will be there and it'll persist. So obviously interacting with things is a huge deal. In Squadron, we have a huge amount of physical puzzles, interactions, in a level that I haven't seen in a lot of FPS games. So it's almost like a sort of story game and a puzzle game and a traversal game and a combat game and a stealth game and a flight game all rolled into one. And so we need systems that are easy to use. And currently what we have, ideas were good, but it's pretty clunky. So we've been really focusing on it because also we want you to be able, keyboard, mouse. What if you joystick? What if you have a gamepad? We need to make sure all that stuff works well. So we don't want to have 400 key presses you have to remember to do stuff, and we don't want it to take forever to interact and do stuff. And so we've really been thinking about it. Those are, by the way, have been large complaints on the PU, just getting in, new person getting into the game, like, how do I get out of bed? How do I do some basic stuff? How do I understand? Right now it's sort of trial by fire. I mean, I think, there's a lot of people, it's almost like, I don't know whether it's a From Software thing where it's like, oh, I managed to beat the challenge of Star Citizen and I actually got to my ship. But we need to make that better, and so that is actually one of the big things we've been focusing on, and the player interaction system. And by the way, these have been plans that have been around for quite a while.
Absolutely.
And Rich, back when he was in charge of sort of the core gameplay group, which was the AFT and the weapon teams and the actor tech team and stuff, that was on the list of things to do. It just, because of what we talked about, the release cadence in Star Citizen on the alpha, it just, didn't get to it yet. Well, we're getting to it now, and we're working on it. So I mean,
part of it is basically removing the barrier. Yeah. So removing the clunkiness, as Chris said, to how to interact with with the environment. So what we've kind of gone to kind of this weighted system. So if you're walking over to a trolley, you shouldn't have to look exactly at the handle to be able to go, oh, I want to use the trolley. You just want to be able to go over there, and the game, you go, I want to interact with the trolley. You just press F, and the game should know, yeah, they want to interact with the trolley. So if I'm looking at your desk, for example, you've got quite a lot of things that I could pick up and take and do whatever I want. But you want to be able to just walk over there and not have to go into a mouse cursor mode to be able to then select it. And you should just be able to go, I want to look at the green ship. I'm going to pick up the green ship. I want to look at, your little mini ship over there, or the book, or your coffee cup, or whatever. And you just want to be able to go and look at those things, press F, and you need confidence that when you're looking at something, and we have the user interface to tell you that, yes, this is the thing that you're going to pick up. And you don't want to have to go into this separate mode to be able to do that. So I think that's one of the fundamental things on the player interaction experience, and that's such a pervasive system across the entirety, because it's the same when you're in a cockpit. Or you're walking around, or you're in EVA, or you're crouched, or you're prone, or all the different environments that you're in. You need to be able to just effortlessly interact with the game world, and you want it to just feel natural and immersed, because you want to get involved in what you're doing in the gameplay, not have to fight the controls. And then on the other side of things, which is FPS radar scanning, it's actually kind of being split into kind of a twofold. The first area is kind of what we're calling kind of like a quick scan. This is something that, again, if you think of the Star Citizen universe, it's very detailed. That's one of our strengths, that we're detail at scale. And so you want to be able to go in and understand all the individual pieces, that you can go in and go, I want to move that thing, or I want to go and get in a giant ship. But sometimes it's quite difficult to realize, okay, what is environment, or what is interactive, or which bits are relevant to me. For example, if you look at Uncharted, they have, painted areas to show you where you need to go and where you need to navigate. But that's not Star Citizen. Star Citizen is built on realism and the reality of the world. So what we want to do is have kind of like the radar and scanning system, where you can do this kind of like quick ping or quick scan wave, single button, and that is kind of just for your local environment, and everything will then be tagged as you look at it. So kind of thing, I look at the camera, it'll come out and it'll have a little info box, and it'll say, okay, this is the model of the camera, this is the information. And it's almost like you've done a little mini scan on the camera, but it's happening for everything around you. And you can just quickly look around and be like, oh, there's a possible surface there, because I want to be able to use multiple cuts. Oh, there's a vent there that I can get access to. Oh, there's a terminal there that I can have. And I'm getting that information. It's almost like that Blade Runner-esque of like, I go into a space and I can go, okay, what are the ingredients that I have to play with as a player for me to be able to progress to the next area? And then we've got the other side of things, which is radar scanning, which is what we're calling like a charge scan wave, where it's the same system, you're holding down the scan button, and that's pinging out across wider areas. And that's where you're looking at, individuals. You're getting, okay, there's 2 guys over there. What's their details? Oh, there's an NPC over there. Okay, I can see an objective that I need to complete. And that's a bit more, because that's more gameplay pervasive. That's something that's going to be more of a risk reward. So that's like, okay, I'm giving my location away, but they're also, so they may or may not, know that they've been scanned. If it's a player, they absolutely will be. And that's all underpinned off the signature system that we do for radar scanning the ships, as at FPS. It's all systemic. It's not, we have to go in and go, oh, it's this custom setup. So we have this kind of usability aspect for radar scanning for people to be able to go in and understand. I think there's been plenty of Reddit posts over the years of people go, oh, I wish scanning, radar scanning would do this and show me little info boxes. And yeah, we have that up and running. So there's that aspect of it which kind of ties in with the player interaction experience of how you play the game and how do you understand what you need to do. And then there's the other side of things, which is then it's more of a proactive tool of you looking through the environment and finding what you want.
We have a couple of videos. Should we show some videos of those?
So I understand we have 2 videos. What's this first one we're going to look at?
So the first one is more kind of showing what I described as radar scanning, that first aspect. So you're going into a space, you're doing a quick scan wave, and then it's quickly showing you up the little bits that you can interact with.
All right, let's take a look at FPS radar in Pi 1.
So you can see here, this is in Asiado, which we've already showcased. This is obviously going in, utilising some of our building blocks we have for the doors. And then here's a scan wave, and you can see that I'm looking at that data pad, and then you can move around, and it's giving me that information. So right now, it's just giving you the basic high-level information in terms of the names and things. But you will also have more detailed information depending on, contextually what the output is seeing. And what you're seeing here is a part of the player interaction system. So you can just, even though that's kind of a complex area, there's lots of little things that you can interact with. But you're getting confidence of, oh cool, I can grab that, I can use the data pad. And you're not having to go into interact mode, you're not having to be driven by the cursor. You can go in and just press F or interact with it. And you've probably seen this in plenty of AAA games, but they don't have the detail and at scale that we do. So we wanted to make sure that system is really robust, but hopefully it gives you kind of an idea of.
And I'd also say that part of the idea is that there's the default action, which in this case is what you see when you're on it when it says grab or I think there's a few other ones that you can use as default action. But the icon, if you just had a single disk with that wasn't broken, then that would mean there's only one thing you can do with it. In a lot of those cases, you could see there was a broken disk in 4 pieces, which was basically saying that's a multi-action. So as you look at it, if, for instance, in that case, if you hit F, it does the default action. If you held F, it would bring up the modular wheel that would show you the other actions. So you could maybe equip it versus grab it or whatever you would do. And so the idea is just like you can do in Rich was talking about a lot of other sort of AAA, even console games. You walk around, you look around, oh, look, I can extra do something with it, right? So there's a bit of that's happening here. So you can just look around and I can interact without having to hold F, move your mouse around and all the rest of the stuff. I mean, we'll still have the overall interact mode that you can go into if you want, but the idea is I just play around if I'm used to playing games a certain way. So there is a certain language of, I think, FPS or even third-person games that exist right now, and we don't want to do something totally different to it because people are used to playing games a certain way. It's like why in an FPS game you run around with WASD and use the mouse because so many people are used to it. And so we're leaning a little bit onto that, but trying to make it much more usable and work with inside a much more powerful system than you typically get in games. And so even there, you saw there's a lot of interactables. You look at them, you can move them around, do all these different things with it, and hopefully it'll be much more intuitive for players in Squadron or Star Citizen.
And that default item actions is a good point, because that's also something we've gone to and we're changing in the fact that we want everything to have a default action that essentially you go over, you press F, it always does that default action. But let's say you're harvesting harvestables and you want, the default action is that it picks it up and puts it into your hand, but you want it to always be to store into your backpack. You'll actually be able to go in there, right click on the item, when you're in interact mode, bring up the wheel, or like Chris says, hold F and just it will bring up the wheel. And that will replace that list that we have currently right now. And you'll actually be able to remap that in the game, 3 clicks, and you go, I don't want it to be pick up into my hand. I want it to go straight into my backpack because that's what you're doing right there. So then you can go and have it, it allows us to give the interaction system how we want it to be by default, but then it puts the onus on the player. If they want it to go, they want a weapon to always go to their backpack because they're happy with the weapons they've already got and they're going looting, they just want it all to be store, they can do that out of the gate so it doesn't always go into their hands. And they have that customizability to be able to interact with the environment and the objects that they're looking at.
Before we move on, we have a second video.
Yeah.
Yes.
I haven't seen this one. You want to set it up, or you want to just go into playing it?
We
Sure.
should play it when we
Yeah,
talk
play
about
it. So I mean, the second one, essentially, what we're about to see is kind of what I talked about. This is the second half of radon scanning. So this is where they're still getting the environmental information, like whether you've got a vent or a terminal or a hacking area, but you're also now getting information about the enemies and the AI and what's out there. So it's a wider and broader.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you basically, it's almost like whether it's X-ray vision or you can hear it through the wall, but you could track someone on the other side of a wall, but you're doing the charge scan, which is much more risky because it's noisy. And if people go, oh, someone's scanning, maybe there's someone over there and they can track you down. But it'd be useful in like when you're stealthing around, it's like you're going to go around a corner, you don't know if there's some enemies around the corner and you want to find out. You use this.
It's very useful,
yeah,
having played lots of levels.
Definitely, because in Squadron, we're trying to have a certain amount of realism. So you're not just going to go and gun down 400 people. So we want you, when you're in situations, you're outnumbered and you have to, it's more of a stealth game in the FPS than it is a straight out run and gun shooter.
Bring it to the point of realism, then bring it back to the point of fun, as you said.
Well, there's a lot of fun stealth games.
All right, so I want to see this clip. I haven't seen it yet. Let's roll FPS 2.
So what you're seeing here is that he's going to do a scan wave in a moment. Essentially what you'll see is that it's now penetrating through the walls, and now you can start to see the slavers that are in this environment. Now these slavers don't necessarily have a radon scanner, so they're not able to pick you up. So what will happen is when you do a scan wave or a charge scan wave, your signatures will basically skyrocket. So that's what will give you away to other people. So in the PvP environment, you're only getting, it's a big risk. If you want to do it, but you're giving away your location. So if you're willing to do that, then so be it. But in a more of a PvE environment, what we're going to do is we're going to have tailored. Some enemies will have radon scanning and some won't. So if they do, then they'll be like, hey, I've just been pinged, and they'll get your location and then they'll go and investigate. So what you're seeing here, on that video is kind of a wider, broader area and seeing through the walls, whereas the first one is kind of a more limited scope. And you can, it's up to the player to choose which one they want to do. The first one is really more about just, we want to encourage the player to go into an environment and go, okay, cool, I'm in this room. What things do I have to interact with? And then the second one is more of a wide escape, like Chris said. When we're playing our stealth levels, you need to have kind of a good understanding of where they are, and it's only temporary. And you will have a cooldown on that charge scan wave, so you're not just going to be able to spam it there forever. It's like you get a temporary picture and you go, cool, I've got a good snapshot. Now I'm going to make my move and go forward.
So while we're still here on the first-person experience, the player experience, let's stick to a couple more topics that are related just to the player before we move into ships and bigger stuff. Ledges and ladders. Everybody knows the struggles of elevators in the persistent universe, but that's not the only way to, traverse the universe to get around and stuff. I understand that you guys have made a number of improvements to mantling over ledges and how to use ladders.
I mean, Legends and Ladders is kind of
best game I ever played.
It's like a board game. Yeah, exactly, absolutely. It's kind of two features that we're focusing on. But I mean, as Chris said, in terms of Squadron development, we're looking at improving the entirety of the traversal experience. How does the player move, and just from general locomotion and how that feels, and then in terms of the traversal moves, so vaulting, mantling, ladders, and so on and so forth. So one of the two areas that we've identified that we wanted to push for was for ledges, which is we wanted you to be able to, I've slightly misjudged my jump because I'm in first person, I can't see my feet. And it's, it's kind of frustrating. You're like, oh, it's just right there. If this was real life, I'd just put my hands out and grab it, right? So that's the first part, that we can actually grab onto ledges now that you're falling past, so that you can actually then pull yourself up, which adds just, it's to be honest, it's huge. Like we've built traversal levels now, and it's the difference is night and day, because when you're in a first person, it's very difficult to judge like right on the edge. So we can add a bit more challenge to the traversal so that you're actually moving around with ledges and grabbing and pulling yourself up. And then the other side of things, which doesn't necessarily sound that interesting in terms of, oh, it's improved ladders. But again, if you play the Star Citizen right now, you get onto a ladder, you're looking bolt straight forward at the wall, you're locked, you can't look around, you have no spatial awareness. It's just, that's it. You're locked in, you can't get off halfway, you can't jump off, you're kind of very locked. So what we've done...
Jump on halfway too.
No, exactly. So what we did is we kind of leveraged how we did body dragging, and that, you know, even though you're attached to this thing, you want to be able to look around. So you can attach to the ladder, you can jump onto a ladder directly, you can run and jump onto a ladder, you can look around full 360 degrees, you can look around 90 degrees as you're going up. You know, and it's just a lot more fluid and a lot more, you know, it doesn't feel like, oh, now I'm locked in. It just feels like you're more of a human being on the ladder and you can look around. And then, obviously, if you can look behind you on a ladder, that opens up environment, you know, opens up scope to jumping from that onto something else. So it's...
Yeah, because you can jump off the ladder halfway up it or wherever.
Exactly.
So there's a huge amount of, I mean, in Squadron, we're putting a lot of traversal gameplay in, which will make its way into the PU when all these sort of systems settle, and I think you'll see a lot more. I mean, you already see a little bit where, you know, you could use a tractor gun to put a crate over or push something to get up and look at stuff in derelicts right now, for instance, in the PU. But imagine a whole level above that, which is kind of what's in Squadron. I mean, even that in the derelicts was really inspired by some of the early work we were doing in Squadron. But there's a lot of like physical and traversal gameplay and puzzles in Squadron, and we're building the systems to also work well with that. And then again, with a systemic world like we have in Star Citizen, where you can move things around and they can persist, there should be multiple ways to solve the problem you're trying to deal with, which is how we've approached the Squadron design. Is like in most of the areas that you go through, there's more than one way to get to the end to solve the problem. To, you know, do you stealth around? You just take it on head on and start shooting, or is a way that you can, you know, do it without seeing anyone because you've just, you know, taken this difficult traversal path. So those are all things that are important, and so it's little things like this, and I would say, I mean, we've got a video to show, but we're still, you know, like some of the finesse of the animation detail is still to come. So a lot of it is
this is a lot
is
still
the
block
out. But we have this beautiful motion capture stage here that we will show you guys at some point when the Manchester Goods Yards and this stage are fully finished, and then Jared will do a updated version of the 2013 tour that I did with Erin, but it will be in a much bigger environment. Anyway, but I would say definitely that, I mean, we could show it, but we got details to come, like, for instance, if you jump and you just make it, you know, you're going to, you know, catch your balance and do that sort of stuff. So that's not in here, but that's sort of the details, the finesse that we're adding to really have that sense of you in first person, feeling your body and your inertia when you're going up and down on it. I mean, if you cut out to the third person when you see some of the stuff, you sort of see some of it even in the block out animations, but there'll be much more in the final version. But we probably should run the video if we can.
All right, ladders.
So obviously this, as you can see, this is final art.
Absolutely.
So this is taken directly from Squadron 42. No, it's obviously a test map. But you can see here that, as Chris said, the level of inertia is still block out phase, but you can see that we're actually starting to get that you can grab on, you can go straight into a mantle or a vault, you can go straight into the pull-ups. And the thing is that what you're seeing here is, you know, while this is just an test map, a lot of these are providing design ethos to then feed into the PU. So if we've got derelicts and we've got environments that we want the player to go and do missions in, we don't just necessarily just have to rely on you've only got jump, or you only can do vault and mantle.
And right there, we did a jump halfway onto a ladder, and here we're looking around to the left, to the right, and you can jump off the ladder at any point. You can slide down it. You can do all sorts of things.
Wow.
We've got a bit of a sneak peek at the end.
Yeah. So
we're gonna fight an elevator.
The true boss.
And we jump across to get on the ladder there. And again, these are all the blockout animations. Oh, I wonder what that is. Someone accidentally put that in there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But the other thing as
back
well.
to our spaceship.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to say about the traversal is while we're highlighting ladders and the ledge grabs and things here, the other thing is that we're also, we've taken deep dive on things like the control input. So, for example, we've got action queuing coming up. So, for example, if you're sprinting and you were shooting just before you're sprinting, you might be holding down shift and left mouse button. And then now, what happens now if you then release shift, you've stopped shooting. But sometimes you want it to continue shooting because I'm still holding the input that I want to do, and what we're kind of terminology in terms of this action queuing. And that's something that we've got a whole matrix of all the different controls, all the different methods from prone to crouch, the transitions, weapon swapping, and so that just using the controls is a lot more fluid, a lot more intuitive. So it's something that we're really putting a really magnifying glass on to making sure that you're not fighting the controls. The controls are working for you. It's doing what you want it to do. So if you are using a gamepad, or you are using a joystick, or you are using mouse and keyboard, it's easy to use and easy to interact with the world so that you can immerse yourself in the environments and the missions and the gameplay. So it's something that we're really pushing forward to make
in
better.
all aspects, right? Because prone's one of the things that we're set to be working on here, right? The crouching, the various transitions between all the stuff. So some of the stuff right now in the PU's clunkier than it should be. And so we've really taken a deep dive on all of it, and to make everything a lot more fluid. Looking around on the ladder is a good example, but also like on a bigger level, right? We've done a complete rework on EVA, what we call sort of push and pull. There's physical interaction. I mean, we should probably talk a little bit about that. We have a video to show of that, but it's a complete redo of the current EVA system, and it has a lot more of what you would expect when you're in space, in vacuum, pushing yourself off. You don't, for instance, you have momentum now, so if you push off in a direction, you will just keep moving in a direction. The use of it's far more easy. Handling weapons and looking around, and some of the tech that we've developed for the push-pull is the same stuff that we're going to be using for prone and a bunch of other stuff. And really, the looking around on the ladders is kind of based on some of the
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of those systems are, and when Chris says push-pull, he means 0G push-pull, not trolley push-pull. But
Although we'll talk about that too.
Yes, we will. But when we talk about EVA T2 and 0G, the biggest thing, again, it's just be an EVA right now in the star system and just look left. You don't have a stability of if you're a human being, you look left, your horizon doesn't change because you move your head and it's the same. Our camera tilts and moves, and then you get into a scenario where you're you can't really understand the perspective of where you were in. It's like, oh, I'm now upside down. So EVA T2, which again you'll be able to see a clip of it working, it's night and day. It is we basically threw the old one away, and this is a fundamental change in terms of how we work in EVA. First off, you're not upright. You're in more of what we call the Iron Man pose, so you're leaning forward. We still retain the upright pose for certain circumstances, but it means that you've got a better sense of your actual volume when you're traversing forward, so you've not got these legs that are beneath you. But you can totally look around 360 degrees. Your camera is stable, as you get a good orientation. When you look back, you see your body. It's fully decoupled, so you're not just pushing forward and you're flying like a spaceship. You push forward, and that gives you an initial inertia in that direction, and you will keep going in that direction until you change. But then when you want to change, you just need to look at another direction, and you push that way. And the way we've implemented it, it's almost like your suit's kind of similar to the IFCS on the ships, that it kind of counters the forces and then allows you to go in that way. We actually originally tried it where you would drift and actually do the curve, but it just made traversing more intricate spaces, which is what we want to do. Eventually we want to be able to turn gravity off in ships, and that you can take those down.
It's definitely. I mean, that's part of the plan. I mean, we
Absolutely.
even in the resource network segment, that's one of the things.
So all of those tight, intricate areas that we've built over the last 7, 8, 10 years now, I suppose. you know, that you can go into those tighter areas, you need it to be stable. You need it to be in a position where you can turn on a dime, that you can look upside down, that you get a good sense of what, you know, your orientation. And I think that's something that we've really pushed ahead on EVA-T2. And to be honest, the engineering team have done a really fantastic job. I find it a lot of fun flying around in EVA.
And then I'd also say the other thing that we should point out in the longer term for the PU, not so much in Squadron because you're in a sort of pilot suit that has EVA as part of its setup, is not every spacesuit is EVA capable. So we're going to separate it where you have to have like basically an EVA pack, a rocket pack for you to sort of propel around. If you don't have one, then it's the physical push-pull. So you can move along surfaces, you can push off against them, you come close to something, you can grab it. If you're in close things and there's handholds, you can grab them and move them around. So we have this physicalized interaction that happens, and you don't actually need to have your EVA pack or jetpack. And then the EVA jetpack is if you go out in open space, that's how obviously you can stop or change your direction and do the rest. And that will be more limited on fuel. So I think long term in the PU, there's going to be some pretty interesting gameplay. So if you do, I don't know, a boarding action or something, maybe you need a space suit that has the EVA pack, or you're doing repairs out in space and you need a space suit with an EVA pack. Yes, you will not be able to repair the ship in that outfit right now, Jared. But I think it gives a really good. It's just going to give more options, more context, because like longer term, what we want to do in the PU is what you wear is important, right? So right now, everybody just runs around in a big suit of armor or a big space. And we haven't really turned on some of the features we've actually put in there that says, for instance, you shouldn't be able to sit in a seat of a space fighter in heavy armor. You shouldn't be there with your gun on the back. You should have a flight suit on, or you come into a city. You shouldn't be wandering around in heavy armor because that's antisocial. Maybe they don't let you go in there. So we want people to have reasons to wear different things, have storage. That's the whole point of the physical inventory system. And as we're starting to roll out, more of it's coming in Squadron, and then in the PU, that's definitely coming online. And things that we're doing like that with the the physicalized cargo and everything else. And if you look at all the new ships, there's always locker and storage. There's we have a whole system for outfits now that was first going to be in Squadron, but then coming to the PU, it's designed so there'll be a nice sort of locker, almost like a wardrobe system that you can go in and hang up your outfit and switch quickly into another outfit, or switch into this
clothes,
space suit,
armor, everything. Yeah,
so we want it to be your virtual second life, and we want to make it as easy as possible for you to manage all these different things that you can wear for different roles. And EVA is one of the minor parts of that, where, like I said, you either have an EVA suit with a pack or not, but you still will be able to move around. And we should probably run the video so we can.
Good job bringing it back around to EVA at the end like that. Let's take a look at the EVA video, see what we're looking at here.
Well, and as Chris says, in terms of
here we go.
The EVA, this is what you're seeing here, is that you'll probably see some of it in the third person. The thrusters are not firing because
it's
decoupled.
the old VFX, but it's also the old VFX code. So we haven't part of the proper. This is a current PU suit versus what we'll have is a new one with a proper pack that has the thrusters in the right position, and when you go forward, the thrusters going from the back.
So what you're actually seeing here is you've actually connected to this surface. So now it's almost like you're in a prone situation, but this is going to be what more our new prone will be. Again, you've got full 360 degrees. You can just move your mouse and you look all the way behind you or all the way in front.
And right now we're moving along here, not because we're thrusting, because we're using our hands to move ourselves along, and we're looking around as we're doing that. If we went out to the third person here, you would sort of see us moving our hands around. I think we'll see it a little later on. There we go, here we go. So we're just sort of pulling ourselves along. And if we wanted to at this point, we could stop and we could push off against it, and then we would just go floating out into space. So that's the sort of idea of what we call push-pull.
And so what you're seeing here...
he just pushed himself off.
So what you're seeing here, that's actually kind of, you're just floating alongside the actual, this fin of this Asiata station. and this is actually keeping you in this orbit. And then if you did, and that's just, you just push forward and go, where you can actually jump off into space. But then this becomes one of the, if you look at physical traversal, where you've got jumping and mantling and vaulting, this is where we have zero-G push-pull. We have the tractor beam that kind of pulls you around in EVA, and then we have your EVA pack, which is limited by your resource of EVA fuel. So this allows you to kind of manipulate and go in EVA, and allows us as developers to build EVA traversal spaces, both wide-ranging and both small scale.
So yeah, here's. I mean, we were before in first person looking around, but here's us cutting out the third person to actually show you what your character and body's doing. And so there's a lot of, I mean, and these are still blockout animations actually, but so there'll be a lot more like nuance or fidelity to it. But yeah, you have a lot more control, directional sense, ability to look around, ability to stop yourself. So I think, in this one, we're going to come up close to the glass above it.
Yes.
And you're actually going to see us, like if you fly into something, you sort of arrest yourself, again, block out animation, but you're going to, as we get down close to it, I think we're going to come down, you'll see as our character comes down here, our player comes down here, put our hands out to brace ourselves, to stop ourselves on the glass here. So all of that's like systemic, that's not marked up or anything, it's all ray casting, seeing if things, you brace yourself when you come up against, hold on, arrest your thing, you can push off against things. So we've spent a fair amount of time and engineering on all this, but it's not just for Squadron, it's going to be, it's obviously useful in some of the environments of Squadron. This is one of them, obviously, the acid aerospatial, you're going to look down on the slavers that you saw in the earlier scan, but the use of this in the PU is going to be massive.
And also the big thing that Chris said there is it's systemic. There's no markup. If you want to go and climb all over a ship, you can do. If you want to climb over a space station, you can do. If you want to climb over anything that's in EVA, it has a surface, you can put your hands on it. It's got a big enough space to put your hands on it. It will work. So there's no like, oh, it only works in this scenario, or it only works in this scenario. It is what you see here. And then as what we've not been able to show today, which is do have working or partially working, is that when you go into very tight environments, if there are handholds, you will be able to grab onto that handhold, or whether it's a terminal or whether it's a hatch to get into a ship, you'll grab onto the handhold, and then instead of putting your hands out and landing, you'll grab on, and then you go, cool, I can use the terminal, or I can look around, and again, you're not locked in, you can look all 360 degrees, you'll switch hands as you look around, and you can get a sense of, okay, where do I want to go next? I want to go over there, cool, or I want to go through this door. And it works in tight environments, wide-scale environments, and fundamentally, it's a lot nicer to play than our current version, which is just,
No, it's massive for the game, so I think there'll be a lot more sort of EVA, external action.
Yeah.
The combat's better, it's much more stable. I think, we'll see a lot of puzzles and traversal in the PU that can be built from that. Because we have a lot of stuff down on planets, but it would also be nice to have more like exploring more the sort of derelict asteroid bases kind of things, and EVA. I think, we all love science fiction, obviously, you're making these kind of games, that's sort of a lot of classic sci-fi that you see. So we spent, that's an example of us being able to spend the time to really think about how we want the system to work, how best it's going to work, and bed it in on Squadron, and then it'll be something.
Yeah, because we did 2 or 3 iterations. We did, we did 2 or 3 iterations of how we wanted to do it. Did we want to have this Iron Man pose? Did we want to have the upright? Did it blend between them? And we were playing it. It's like, it doesn't feel right. And now you can just, you know it when you get it right, because you can just go, and you're like, oh, this feels really nice, and you just end up flying around the level and connecting things. And so yeah, this unlocks content for the PU.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I purposely didn't watch the videos. I wanted to be able to react as honestly while we were recording these as possible. And I know you said those were blockout animations, but as somebody who's been with Steve Bender on a Friday night at the Oust House, like, that looks just like
Steve Bender?
Yeah, it looks just like Steve Bender crawling around. Sorry, Steve. But no, it looks great, and I think everybody who saw that now is going to see the potential, the absolute gameplay potential for all kinds of zero-G gameplay possibilities. That is really, really
no,
cool.
that's great. I mean, there's some other. I mean, there's some smaller things, like we have one other thing here. We have a video for, which is, it's not as big as a system as, like, say, the EVA replacement, but like the hover trolley that we've got. I know that I saw.
I really like the hover trolley.
Yeah, no, I like it
really
a lot.
like
I
it.
saw the Reddit thread saying, "Why doesn't someone do a hover trolley?" Well, actually, that was something we've been working on for quite a while. But the thing we can show you here in a few minutes. But the thing that's really good about this, because obviously the physical trolleys, the wheels get caught. I mean, just like in the real world, right? And you've got problems of going upstairs and all the rest of the stuff, just like you would in the real world. Is that it sort of opens up the potential, and this really plays into the PU. We use it in Squadron for certain things, like you'll see in what we show here. But for the PU, it's actually much more interesting because now you have the ability. We always had this design for our bigger cargo containers, right? Ones that you can't just pick up yourself. We originally had this design where there was sort of a Gravlev system where you stuck in this thing and the Gravlev, it would come up, and then now you can push around a huge container. And we're moving for physicalized cargo. It's going to be in 318. I think Tony's trying to squeeze a few things in. We'll see if he manages to get everything in. But this isn't necessarily going to be in 318, but it will come in probably not too far in the near future. But this allows you to not just have your little tractor beam and pick up something and move it around, but okay, let's have a bigger container. And what happens if you turn it on, up it goes, and then you just push it into your cargo hold, turn it off, locks into the cargo grid. And now that cargo container, imagine a bigger one. Well, what happens? Like right now in the inventory system, you can put things in your local inventory of your ship or other various inventories. Well, imagine your container, say one of these bigger, like maybe a 16 SCU one or whatever, that's sitting there, and now I can place, I don't know, large vehicle items in it. I can place all sorts of stuff in it. So I could load up this container, I could push it into my ship, then I could fly it off to some remote planet and put it next to, where I'm camping out, or longer term where you say maybe a player base or some group of players with persistent decide to take over a derelict or something. And I can basically load up a bunch of supplies in a container, like bigger supplies or weapons or armor suits or whatever, and put it in there just by doing this. So I think the underlying sort of hover tech for the trolley stuff is really good, because it will really play into the cargo and the logistics that are going to come with that. Because longer term with persistence and what we're doing, I think there's going to be a whole bunch of gameplay that will be revolved around the logistics of living, right? Like how do I have my food? How do I have my drinks? How do I have my raw materials? How do I have my weapons? If two orgs are fighting a war over a patch of land, someone's got to show up with extra, ammo and missiles and all that kind of stuff, or weapon replacement, especially as we get repairing and the salvaging and stuff. Okay, well, rather than have to fly it to a place that can do your repair, maybe there's an on-field repair that's happening right there, and someone's changing out a broken weapon for another weapon because you've loaded it up and stored it in your container. So there's the possibilities in the PU is huge, and this is an example of just little bits of tech that we're putting into Squadron that we're planning on bringing it across into the PU. But in the PU, they just have a lot more potential, like the EVA. So.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing about trolleys is when we approached trolleys with the physical trolleys, was that we wanted them to serve two purposes. One, we wanted them to serve a purpose that is more traditional games, which is, I can move things around, and that allows me to create, traversal opportunities for me. If I'm blocked, I can move a box over here, and I can get up higher now, which is kind of what the more physical trolleys are kind of better suited for. And this is another example where we kind of put trolleys into the PU, but there wasn't really a use case or a best use case. So that at the moment they're just used as enemies, or I've seen people fly them as missiles out of ships, but they're not really utilised for what we want them to use. And then you've got the other side of trolleys, which is we want them to be used for cargo loading. Now, again, we've got a lot of ships, we've got a lot of different ramps, the scales of those ramps is larger, and with hover trolleys, when you see the video, you can push them downstairs. You can push them up any ramp. The weight that you're having to physically push a physical trolley, which is taken into account, hover trolleys, you don't have to worry about that because, you know, let's play the video.
See the video.
Let's see the video there, and
We've
you can
hyped
see
this
it.
up now. Hover Trial is
Yeah.
the most amazing thing in the world.
Yeah.
Here we go.
So you can see here, this is actually a slaver pod. So
It
you know,
closes down, it's on the floor. We're going to activate it. Levitates up now, grav lev's on. You get hold of it, bam. And by the way, the new interaction system's not working
Yes.
in this demo here. It's a separate build. But we're, you know, as you can see, it's getting pushed over
bulkheads. But this is essentially a really big improvement for us because we want physical cargo, and we want physical cargo to be a big deal in the PU, that you have to move that cargo, you have to make decisions on how long it's going to take to load it up, not just buy it from the kiosk and it appear in your ship. So this gives us the ability to do that and, like Chris says, move much larger things than what you'd normally be able to push as a human being.
Yeah, I mean, this happens to be just a slaver pod, but you know, obviously you'd be pushing, you know, as long as it's grav lev equipped and has the sort of hover device, then you know, like I said, you could have large shipping containers and stuff like that.
And this is all underpinned by our GravLeg technology, so the same, you know, as a Dragonfly, or eventually you'll hopefully be able to move much larger ships if you need to rearrange them, or you know, when you're moving things around on your homestead or whatever we do eventually. And we've actually had this working on a planet, so you can just push this over planet terrain. You don't let go. You stay stable because it doesn't actually undulate unless there's something actually physically touching it. So it allows it to be much more stable. And what we want to do for your cargo loading is that we'll use a system similar to the cargo grid, that you'll be able to snap things on top of it. So if you have a flat platform, you'll be able to snap cargo boxes onto it so they won't fall off. And then you'll be able to, you know, reliably move them without frustration. And again, you can see some of our design ethos coming through is that we're trying to remove the barrier to entry. We're trying to remove the control mechanism, the things that frustrate you as you play the game, and kind of make that a lot simpler.
I see this and all I can think about is Spock and the photon torpedo tube.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
Very cool. So we've talked about a number of things now that are related to the player, to the first person and stuff like this. And we got a couple more we're going to come back to later. But let's move up into spaceships.
Yep.
Because spaceships are a big part of the experience.
Our heroes.
We just had earlier in the day, we had our flight experience a segment where they talked about master modes and quantum boosts and stuff like this. But at a higher level and stuff, let's talk about how the flight experience is changing a bit through the work in Squadron 42, and anything you want to share with us on that.
I think the biggest thing for me, and I think it's what Chris and I have talked about, is the difficulty of developing a game over a period of time when it's a live product, is that you're developing things in isolation and you're putting them out. So you're going, okay, this is our T0, you know, this is MFDs. And you're, okay, now we want to do the flight HUD. And we put the flight HUD. And now we want to do this section. And what happens is, maybe it's a different designer over the years, or maybe it's someone else, or maybe they've learned from what's happened or gone out previously. And lots of things come together, but they don't necessarily feel right, because they've not been approached where you've gone, we're going to do it all at once, because you can never do it all at once if you've got to hit quarterly releases. Right. So with Squadron development, what's it allowed us to do is allowed us to look at the HUD and the MFDs and everything together and go, well, actually, we don't need all that information on the HUD if we've got it on the MFDs. Or we don't need all the information here if we've got physical switches. And it's allowed us to approach the design of the cockpit experience holistically, so that we can go, okay, let's pull all this noise away that